please invite all the panelists to rejoin us? And thanks, Helen. We've probably only got 10 minutes left for our panel discussion, but I think you're all, I didn't want to cut you all off. You're all amazing. So I'm going to put two questions to the group. First of all, I wanted to invite Corey, from where we started with your concrete channels that you saw, and these sort of proof of concepts that you've seen where people have done the modelling to show that natural systems can remove pollutants, they can convey flood. What's your take home from what you've seen from the speakers who followed you?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and there was some beautiful examples set up. So I think really from an Aboriginal point of view, it'd be nice to still be able to follow, I guess, firstly, the engagement with local community. I noticed that there wasn't not one example of Aboriginal engagement, and tell me if I'm wrong, please. So firstly, working with traditional owners to get their view on water management is probably number one. And then secondary, if there's opportunities to follow some of the dreaming stories associated to creek management, we're talking thousands of years of sitting by those creeks and living next to those creeks and those stories associated to those creeks. So, we have that here in Ghana. We have a dreaming story that relates strongly to how the Milky Way operates, and then how the big red gum trees are essential to stabilization, and their association to fallen logs, and then those associations to critters and to the reeds. So there's amazing relationships that I think we're still not grasping that needs to be captured. But other than that, I think there was some beautiful examples of how we can start to really think about the impacts and really informing structure, and then I think, like, just thinking and listening to Helen just then on that last one, we really need to be able to push back to local governments and to especially developers, and property owners, and say, well, do you want, what do you want here? What's your legacy in this space as an owner of this land? And how do you contribute back to the community, but not that, but back to environment, and ask those questions.
Thank you. I'm interested in, like, you've raised the issue early, Corey, about, what is a living entity? What could we get to a point where there's legislation for a living entity? I think each of these projects, the frameworks, the plans, the proof of concept, they've all kind of obviously got over the political hurdles and barriers to get this to reality. I'm interested in the panel's views on how do we, in answer to Corey's question at the start, how do we move towards a living entity approach, and how could what political barriers did you overcome to kind of get this across the line? Because I think that's what we need to do at a city scale. You've managed to do it at a project scale. How do we extrapolate that out and go, okay, we want to do it we want to give this whole river system the protection, not just this section of it. And I'm trying to open that up to the panel.
The whole catchment.
Yeah. So would anyone like to tackle that? You're biting off too much. Like, if we wanted to move to a living entity legislation, what are your learnings from your projects that you could share with us if we wanted to say, okay, we want to take it to the next level? What are your learnings?
So I'm just standing in for Rachel. She's just commuting at the moment. So I also work for Healthy Land and Water, and I love the living entity idea. I've written it down and highlighted it, and I think it's great. How we move it forward, I don't know off the top of my head. What are some of the learnings from some of the on-ground projects we've delivered locally here in Brisbane or Southeast Queensland? Politically, I think was your question, Melissa. How do we sort of overcome some of those political hurdles? They were challenging, no doubt. Just working. We aren't a local government body, so perhaps that was part of the challenge. Was we were trying to do these projects on local government land, and trying to work with the local government to identify sites that would be suitable for these projects does take a while. And, when you're in a grant environment and you've got, a couple of weeks to put together a proposal and you're trying to sort of push council to, find a place for these projects, learning from that is be prepared, I guess, and, try and identify some ahead of time. That probably doesn't really answer your question in terms of the living entity. But yeah.
Any other thoughts? I know, Nigel, you're at the early stage of yours. I mean, you've convinced someone to rip up a bunch of concrete and put in a natural system. What do you think was key to getting that across the line?
So I can think of anybody to got them onto the project relatively late. But yeah, looking back at the business case for that and looking at different alternatives. I mean, I guess it's specific to that catchment, and but and in answer to one of the questions that put on the Q&A is, well, how do you ensure a more natural solution versus a traditional engineering approach? And I think it's really about, well, it comes back to, well, in this case, councils and what their framework were, what was, and what their broader objectives are, and they were, weren't just about least cost solutions or renewing assets. They were about broader objectives for the community and environmental enhancement and recreation. All those things are set up in the master plans and their strategic vision that underpins projects like this. And so for that reason, it was a no-brainer. But that being said, there's there's still civil engineering in it that we use retained in that example, etc., because they have a function and that can work within a more natural environment.
And how about you, David? Like, I felt like yours, you had those natural systems concepts. Was that challenging for people to get to take into that next step?
Yeah, I think if I come to this question of living entity and the intent behind the living entity, and I think if I paraphrase Corey, I think he crystallized it when he said, for us, waterways are our brothers. And I think if you come to this idea of the living entity and what's at its core is this rights for waterways and what are the rights for waterways, and then therefore underpinning that is what is our obligations to those waterways. I think that comes to the core of what we approached our project, like what was our obligation to this waterway, what were we doing? That's for me why I started with the underpinnings, what were we approaching and what we were trying to do. I think there's probably, for me, when I think about that on a project and a practical level, there's two elements for me that are interesting in terms of this concept of a living entity. I grapple with the concept when I come to a concrete channel, and how do we address a living entity as a concrete channel. I grapple with what that means, in the sense that I find that very interesting concept. And then if I apply it to a natural waterway that we should be respecting, it becomes intrinsically obvious what that respect is and what the approach should be. But yeah, I think it's a very challenging one in an urban context because urban waterways mean so many different things for so many different people.
What I'm hearing is we've got one in before a lot of people probably have to go. What I'm hearing is that if we all had, each project had a very clear vision of what it needed to achieve, and the leaders or the proponents were quite happy to stand up and withhold that vision up, and they didn't compromise too much, as from what I could see. And so I'm wondering, Corey, if that's what we need to come together and have a shared vision for a living entity. And once we've got that shared vision, then perhaps everything falls out from underneath it. And at the moment, we don't have the shared vision, perhaps. I wonder what you think about that, just in closing.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between First Nations people around the world and Western system. It just doesn't. It's more of a domination, effect rather than a sibling or a brother effect. We really, we basically chain and lock up our waterways without thinking, they are our siblings, and would you do that to a family member? From First Nations around the world, they would tell you that that is a relationship that they have, you know, is unique. It's intrinsic. It's part of them, and you know, it's part of us, and it's something that we need to learn moving forward. That, you know, if we're going to be on this planet for another 40,000 years, we have to work with our brothers and sisters, and I'm talking about our trees and our plants and our waterways, and be passionate about it, you know, and put their feelings and thoughts first, you know. Like, I think we were talking about the Observance Act, you know, where you witness violence, you know, you are a contributor to that violence if you don't hold that up and make that accountable. You know, you need to be able to stand up and protect country as much as possible. You know, it's not, like I said, like 100 times, I don't know how many times I say it, but it's not for us. It's not for you and me today. You know, think of what is your legacy and what's your contribution to this work.
Yeah.
That's the question. And
Absolutely. Well, I think I have to bring it to a wrap because we've just gone past 2. But I just want to thank all of you for the time that you've done to prepare for today, but also your thoughts. We've gathered everything that everyone's been typing. For anyone who put in a question, please fill out our survey and let us know what you thought of the event by scanning the QR code. So basically, any of the questions that weren't answered today, we'll follow up with the presenters and get them answered, and we'll circulate that. We're also going to circulate all of your feedback from Corey's questions that he posed. There's been a lot of really great stuff coming through about natural systems, traditional connection for design, inherent ecosystem value, valuing that just for its being. So we'll wrap it all up, and we will circulate the findings to everybody. And I hope this is just a start of a conversation. Like, I'm really looking forward to catching up with many of you outside of this forum and seeing how we can kind of keep these learnings going together, and even check back in a couple of years' time and see how all these projects are going. So thanks again to everyone. Be grateful if you could just fill out the survey. It takes about 2 minutes, and let us know what you thought of today. And we'll see you at the next Worcester National Community of Practice online event. Thank you.